The Hour is presented by Corona. Please drink responsibly.
Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. It's the Worldwide Day of Giving, Tony. So what have you given today?
I'm Frank Isola. Apparently, he gave up today's show.
Oh,
he wanted no part of it.
Gave it to you.
Yes.
How about that?
Last minute replacement.
Such a giving person.
They said they had to ask you. You had a list of people. You got to the end of the list, and that's where I was.
Not true.
Crossed out a bunch of names. I finally made it to me.
Not true at all. Welcome to PTI. Tony folded after yesterday's show. So here to pick up his slack is our great friend, Frank Isola. Wow.
The old interns used to boo. The new ones clap.
Big
I like
ovation you got in there. Let's start with not one, but two 62s shot in today's first round of the U.S. Open at L.A. Country Club. Ricky Fowler got the first, and Xander Schauffele followed with his 15 minutes later. 62 was the lowest round in the history of the United States Open. Plenty of great players are still on the course, Frank, but what do you make of what Fowler and Schauffele did today?
I think it's going to be an interesting weekend out in L.A. because, like you said, you have one guy shooting 62, and it's not 5 years later. It's 15 minutes later. You have another player shooting 62, and you think about Ricky Fowler, Xander Schauffele, two guys that probably fall into the category of best players never to win a major. Obviously, Xander Schauffele, a lot younger.
List, yeah.
But if you look at Ricky Fowler, think about what's happened to him. Here's a guy, 34 years old, completely fell off the map. Last year, he was ranked 176 in the world. Hasn't played in a lot of majors, only 4 in the last 3 years. So when you talk about a good story from a very likable player, what a great way to start the tournament, a great way to start the weekend for him.
Frank, no doubt. And Fowler is one of the most popular players on tour. I've gotten to know him a little bit, just extremely likable. He didn't play in the U.S. Open in 21 or 22. And you look at it, you go, oh, my goodness, I hope that Ricky Fowler is not somehow just going to be done early and out of the world golf picture because he's talented. He's still young, as you mentioned, 34 years old and so likable. But let me just say this. And Schauffele, younger player, and has been buzzing around, has like as many low rounds, and many high finishes as almost anybody the past 4 years. But let me say this, man. The U.S. Open, the tournament itself is known for being brutal. 62 is not brutal. It's the opposite of brutal. And L.A. Country Club, L.A. North, has been hyped and praised and slurped for the last week. And they're going, what? People throwing darts? Now, the next high finishers after those two guys were only 2 and 3 under. So it's not like there were a pile of guys at 6 and 7 under. But you got the best in the world, some of whom are just teeing off right now as Schauffele and Fowler are taking credit and taking a bow. What does this mean? The U.S. Open is supposed to be a torture chamber. What do you think of it being taken for granted so far?
Yeah, I think you should grab your clubs and get out there. You could probably break 80 on that course the way things are going. But think about Ricky Fowler here.
Par 70, but still, 2 par 5s.
Exactly.
Still, the number is the number.
Yeah, not a par 72. He finished second in the 2014 U.S. Open. That's his best finish in the major. He's had 8 top 5 finishes at majors. What a great way to start now, with 3 more rounds. But the way that that's playing, you wonder, you mentioned it, Mike, when these other guys start going out there, you wonder what the scores are going to look like, right?
Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. All right, let's move to reports that the New Orleans Pelicans could consider trading Zion Williamson if it means landing Scoot Henderson in next week's draft. Mark Stein says a source told him there's a, quote, rising level of exasperation within the organization regarding Williamson's ongoing availability and overall approach. All right, the Pelicans were in first place in the West before Zion's hamstring injury. So, Mike, does dealing him to land Scoot make sense to you?
Yeah, if he's not going to be available, and if they think he's not doing the things in his life that are going to make him available, and by that we mean nothing sinister. There are people who don't think he's in the kind of shape and doesn't stay there, doesn't maintain it, the kind of shape that's going to allow him to play 75 games or so a year and be the player, because in glimpses, Frank, we all know, my God, this kid is great when he's been out there, but he's not out there nearly enough. He's not available. And so if you think Scoot Henderson is going to give you 75 games and be a player who is worthy of, that kind of level in the draft, taking at that level, yeah, I could see it. I think there are a lot of teams that that think that Zion's available. We heard that talk in Denver and Miami. I know you were in Miami last week. That buzz is out there. Would I trade for Zion? Yes. If I was an also-ran and I thought I could get Zion, and these days you need to get lucky in the draft or on draft day with a trade, I'd trade for him, hoping I could do something. Maybe he needs the shakeup of being scared once, being dealt, being told by a club, we don't want you. Maybe that might work in his favor long term.
Yeah, I feel fortunate. I got to see him actually play in person this past season. Opening night in Brooklyn, he had missed over 500 days. I got to be honest, Mike, it looked like he hadn't missed anything. He was telling the Brooklyn Nets, I'm going to drive to my left, I'm going to finish at the rim, and you can't stop me. And they couldn't. But the problem is he just doesn't play enough. He's been in the league 4 years. He's played 114 games. He missed last season, and then this season he only plays 29 games. So if I'm New Orleans, and forget anything going on off the court, all the drama, who cares about that stuff? To me, this is more about his availability. Can he stay in shape, and can you stay healthy? And now for the Hornets, it's interesting because he's got a connection to North Carolina, having played at Duke. He's from South Carolina. You're always looking to sell tickets. But if you're Charlotte, you look at some of the history of draft picks that they have had of bringing in players. Got Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Adam Morrison, Frank Kaminsky they've drafted. Plus they've had injury. They bring in Gordon Hayward, he gets hurt. If I'm Charlotte, I'm not sure I'm doing it. But if I'm New Orleans, I'm looking to get off Zion Williamson because he simply doesn't play enough.
It's tempting, Frank. It's so tempting because you got to get look. Teams get lucky on draft day now, and with the 11th pick and the 13th pick, and Charlotte's got number 2, and they can take the kid from Alabama. But we don't know if he's going to be as good as Zion.
I know.
I mean, Zion at his best. What can you count on? That's the question. What can you count on?
Yep.
Now to Major League Baseball, where Nationals manager Davey Martinez was steamed by the play that cost his team the game last night. The Nats and Astros were tied at 4, bases loaded, 1 out in the bottom of the 9th, when shortstop C.J. Abrams fielded a grounder, came home to force the second out. But catcher Keibert Ruiz's attempt to turn 2 deflected off Jake Meyers' helmet. Martinez argued that Meyers was out of the baseline. He was. And even presented a still photo in his press conference to make his case, but the play's not reviewable, Frank. Should it be?
I think it should be. And what's interesting about this is when these two teams met in the World Series, the same exact play happened with Trey Turner. He gets hit with the ball, and he ends up being called out. So I can understand why Davey Martinez is upset. Now, I'm a purist when it comes to baseball, but because now everything is getting reviewed and they're talking about, robotic umpires down the road, why wouldn't you go and review a play like this? It's a run-scoring play that's deciding a game. And Davey has the evidence in his hand. I get it sometimes with the still shots, it could be a little misleading, but he was out of the base pass there. I don't think there's any question about it. Everything gets reviewed now in sports, and I get it at times. It's too much, and it kills the flow of the game. But baseball, the games have been moving. That should be reviewed.
Frank, I'm torn on this one. I mean, I'm not about to refute your logic in the case you just presented for doing it. But part of sport is pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
Part of sport is coloring right on the line, if not outside it. Pun intended with baseline. I don't know that I want everything reviewed. I just don't want it. And I'm not talking about just the procedural of the games taking forever, although that would be the case. I'm just talking about a guy sliding a hip into the base path and what should be called and what isn't. Make the damn call and don't give me robots. Put Blue out there, even though I'm taking shots at Blue half the season. Put him out there. Let him get the call right. Let him argue it. I don't think I want it reviewable. I understand the case. And if I'm Davey Martinez, I'm definitely upset, and I'm doing exactly what he did. I'm taking that still photo to the press conference and at least present my case to the national and local media.
Yeah, I like the hip that you're talking about. That was Reggie Jackson, that famous play in the World Series against the Dodgers when Tommy Lasorda was losing it. But here's the thing with, the replay review. in the neighborhood play used to be something everybody accepted because the shortstop on, say, a double play, he's going to be near the base because he doesn't want to be on the base and maybe get his leg taken out. Now, when it gets reviewed, you're not standing on the base. They call the runner safe. So when you went down this road, you open up the Pandora's box. David Martinez, with the, the evidence in his hand, he was right.
Yeah. I like the neighborhood play, too. Let's take a break. Coming up, Karl Anthony Towns makes a big boast. He makes a lot of them about his game.
And we'll find the words to describe last night's steal of home in the Yankees-Mets game. Little Subway Series in June.
Frank, I think I shot 90.
That's pretty good.
At LA North the last time I was there. That's too low. That's too low. That suggests
2 guys in 50.
Pardon the Interruption is presented by Corona. Please drink responsibly. Part of Happy Hour. Welcome back to Pardon the Interruption, presented by Corona. Part of Happy Hour.
Time to fill in some blanks with Fill in Frank. What's first?
Karl Anthony Towns is blank when he predicts people are going to say he changed the game.
Frank, I'm sort of hesitant because part of me really likes Karl Anthony Towns and his story and all that he's overcome personally. And I know you're familiar with that, family things and issues, and he's there's a charm about him and he's engaging. But then at times he just goes too far and does or says stuff where you go, dude, what are you saying? I mean, he's a big man who can shoot, but so are a lot of people now. He wasn't the first, he isn't the only. And so I'm going to say that people are not going to sit around saying Karl Anthony Towns changed the game. Therefore, I'm going with delusional because Karl Anthony has that element too. Again, there's charming and there's delusional. And he can be both, like in the locker room in a period of 4 minutes when you're talking to him. He said this to Pat Bev, speaking of delusional, so delusional.
Carl Sr., who I know pretty well, I'm sure he's watching the show, so I'm going to take the politically correct word and say dreaming. Okay. How about that? Dreaming instead of delusional. But when you think about, and I think what he's referring to is being a big man that could shoot threes, and he did win the three-point shootout a couple of years ago at All-Star Weekend. But when you talk about guys that change the game, you're talking about Wilt and Kareem and Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Steph Curry, LeBron James, maybe one day Jokic. You're doing it on a grand scale, and you're winning all the time. He's yet to get out of the first round. He also said on the Patrick Beverley podcast, here's the thing about the ex-players or the current players having podcasts. They get their teammates and ex-teammates to really say some crazy stuff. He also said that our run this year, meaning Minnesota, after they made all the trades and getting into the playoffs, was actually more impressive than what Denver did. Denver won the championship. That's also dreaming.
Delusional.
Exactly.
And by the way, Karl Anthony Towns, he's got like the greatest golf swing. Since we're on a U.S. Open weekend,
too.
There's so much to like about Karl Anthony Towns. Like I said, I feel a little torn and a little guilty, but I said it anyway. Delusional.
Change the game.
Pat Bev, Chicagoan, my boy, delusional.
He's delusional too.
What's next?
Isaiah Kiner-Falefa's steal of home last night was blank.
All right, Frank, you're familiar with this, I'm sure. I mean, the problem with this theft of home plate is that you got so much going on. You've got a runner coming into, you got the runner stealing home. You've got a pitch that's not really an attempt to throw out the runner, we don't think, and it's about to hit the batter who's bailing out of the box, and so it's unclassic. It's not like Jackie Robinson stealing home with Yogi Berra's glove there tagging him out, should have been out. Jackie Robinson, by the way, stole home 19 times. Wow. Okay, and by the way, it's not like Javi Baez, who stole home recently in the postseason. It's not like Rod Carew stealing home 17 times. Jackie Robinson, there's no dude bailing out. That's a classic theft of home, he and Javi Baez. And by the way, there's some rumor out there that Ty Cobb, pre-records, stole home 54 times.
Amazing.
This was so common, it wasn't even a big deal. Unclassic. Batter, high pitch, bailout, too many things going on. Unclassic.
All right, my word is dangerous, and I'll get to that in a minute, but you mentioned Jackie Robinson, that famous steal of home. You know, at Yogi's museum when he was alive, Yogi had a picture of that in the museum. When he would show folks the picture, he would always point to it and say, out. Jackie Robinson was out.
He was
they
out.
called him safe, but he was definitely out. But other than if you're a quarterback standing in the pocket knowing you're going to get hit, or a defenseman in hockey, going down to block a shot knowing you're going to get hit with the puck, this is about as close to that as you can get because you have the pitcher throwing a ball, you have a guy standing there with a bat, you got a catcher that's going to try to block the plate. And think about Billy McKinney, the batter. Once the pitcher realizes what's happening, guys are screaming that he's stealing.
He rushes
Think
it.
about where that pitch went. That went right by the bat.
That's too many things. Your eye should be attracted to the slide at the plate and the throw
But when
and
you're
the
left-handed,
application of a
it's your
tag.
blind spot. When you're left-handed, it's your blind spot. It's dangerous.
Wonder how many times Lou Brock did it. Ricky Henderson 4 times.
Yeah.
The theft of home plate is a classic thing in baseball. There's not enough of it, and now we got people junking it up in the left
if you
box.
get thrown out, it's like getting thrown out on third for the third out. It's just a bad play if you get thrown out at home.
I have the final
steal.
word, unclassic. Let's take one
Dangerous.
last break. Still to come, Shohei has been struggling over his last 8 starts. Will tonight's be different?
And what's at stake on the pitch between the UX and Mexico tonight? Maybe 12-0. That's how they taunt.
I'm gonna watch
them
that.
In Mexico.
That's the center of sports watching
it's
tonight.
a good time for you. It's
the
10 o'clock here in the East.
golf goes off at 8, right?
Yep.
And then the game comes on out here in the West.
Interruption is presented by Corona. Please drink responsibly. Part of Happy Hour.
Time for you people to get happy. Happy 85th birthday, Billy Williams, one of my absolute baseball idols who played alongside fellow Cubs Hall of Famers Ernie Banks, Fergie Jenkins, and Ron Santo. Williams' Hall of Fame career includes 6 All-Star Game appearances, Rookie of the Year in 1961, and a National League batting title in 72, a year he fell just short of MVP won by Johnny Bench. It was a career that almost never happened. Williams left his Double-A team in San Antonio in 1959 and planned to quit the game because he was so fed up with racism and segregation. But the legendary Buck O'Neil visited him at his family home in Alabama and persuaded him to return. Billy Williams made his major league debut later that season.
Growing up in New York, I never saw Billy Williams play, but the guys that we used to hear about were Ron Santo, Ernie Banks, and Billy Williams. So explain this to me. Earlier this season, the Cubs had a Billy Williams bobblehead night. They gave out 10,000 of them.
Don't go.
And they had number 1. He wore number 26. Explain yourself,
I'm so upset about
Mr.
it.
Cub.
I'm so upset about it. I walked into a World Series game, by the way, with Billy Williams, with my brother wearing his number 26 jersey on his back.
Not number 1? He didn't have number 1.
Pretty cool moment. 26.
They apologized for that. The Cubs did.
Happy anniversary, Greg Popovich. On this day 20 years ago, almost at 26, Pop won the second of his 5 NBA championships, beating the then New Jersey Nets in 6. Tim Duncan and David Robinson were the bigs on that team, and Pop is now looking forward to his next one. Victor Wembanyama, whom the Spurs will surely select with the top pick in the draft 1 week from tonight. Pop's contract expired at the end of this season, but SpursTalk.com says the expectation is the 74-year-old Pop will soon get a 3-year deal at $14 million per.
And remember, Mike, a lot of people thought, all right, once Tim Duncan leaves, Greg Popovich would leave. That's not what happened. And now the idea is because they have so much salary cap space that they might add veteran type of players. They're not going to try to tank next year. They might actually try to win and make the playoffs with Wembanyama as their center.
You and I could have spring times in San Antonio again.
Been there a lot.
In our near futures.
Yep.
Happy trails to a game-time grand slam for Eugenio Suarez. The Mariners' third baseman appeared to have the game tied with the bases loaded in the bottom of the 9th, but his deep drive to right was snatched by Marlins right fielder Jesus Sanchez. 1 run did score on the tag-up to make it 4-1, but that's how it ended. The Marlins are 38-31 this season, just 4.5 behind the Bravos in the NL East.
You see, defense is exciting, and I can never feel bad for the Mariners when something like this happens, because I seem to remember they had a center fielder that used to do this to a lot of guys, steal home runs, steal doubles, steal singles, Ken Griffey Jr., so turnabout's fair play for your Seattle Mariners.
Yeah, that's true. He snatched a lot of stuff. No errors today, Frank, so let's get to the big finish. Shohei on the mound against the Rangers tonight. Who you got?
Tell you what, the Rangers have been terrific. Shohei last night, opposite field, upper deck. But his last 8 starts, 4.88 ERA.
Not good. He needs a
No.
little bounce back
No.
on the mound at least.
The Cardinals have lost 5 straight. Think Oliver Marmol is in trouble.
Marmol won the division last year, but they're the worst in the NL this year. The Cardinals don't do business that way. I'm happy they're terrible, but they don't do business that way. The Nevada legislature approved the stadium financing deal for the A's. Your thoughts?
You know what? It's heartbreaking, and I don't live in Oakland. I don't really have a connection there. I feel bad for the people of Oakland. It's a great city.
I do too.
It's a great sports town. Their football team left. Their basketball team went across the bay, and now they're going to lose
8 miles.
They should have built a better stadium, because that stadium is dreadful. Today is the 35th anniversary of the release of Bull Durham. Are you a fan?
You know what, Frank? It's okay. I think it's overrated, and the historical references, it's like, okay, let's get over it. Like most of these, sports movies are just not as good as they ought to be. Last one, USA versus Mexico tonight in the CONCACAF Nations League semi.
Yeah.
Big game in Vegas. Who you got?
You said it, in Vegas. We were just talking about Vegas. U.S. has been the better team. U.S. will win. Could face Canada this weekend for the championship, which has become a really good rivalry. Used to be U.S.-Mexico.
Yeah.
Now U.S.-Canada is just as good.
Big
That's
deal
Tony's
tonight.
team. We're out of time. Thanks for watching. I'm Frank Isola.
I'm Mike Wilbon. Same time tomorrow, knuckleheads. You can get the PTI podcast on the ESPN app or Apple Podcast. And now, your SportsCenter.
How many guys you got shooting 62? We had 2 in 15 minutes. Get out there, Mike.
Nah.
Mike, you'll break 80.
It won't be that easy.
Never.
Okay, Frank. Can Bradley Beal be the final piece on the championship team? And where, if so, would he fit best?
He absolutely can be. I think as a third guy, certainly a team like Miami, when you look at Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, the Clippers. And I'll tell you what, I know maybe you should cover your ears. The New York Knicks have a lot of pieces where they can get Bradley Beal. Because as you know, his contract is ridiculous, and Washington knows they're looking to get off that money. And with a no-trade clause, he could somewhat dictate where he wants to go. And they're not looking to bring back salary. Really what they're trying to do here is rebuild. My issue with Bradley Beal, since 2017, he's only been in 11 playoff games. And he's missed 85 games the last 3 years, so he hasn't been very durable. But I do think in the right situation, and he's only going to end up going to a contending team, whether that was Milwaukee, Miami, the Clippers, the Knicks, and Miami. Miami, Boston. I think, would be the Boston. I'm not doing it if I'm Boston. I'm keeping Jaylen Brown. The thing with Miami, though, I'm going to explore Damian Lillard before I explore Bradley Beal.
Well, Frank, I'll give you that. This has become a much debated thing because Bradley Beal is good enough to make you salivate, but let's not get carried away. I heard my man Jay Will, a superb scout, an A-plus scout when it comes to basketball in his whole life, say something like Bradley Beal was like a 1 or a 2. No. I mean, he hadn't. Jay Will, you haven't watched the Wizards enough. No. Bradley Beal's a terrific basketball player. Yep. He's somewhere between 15 and 20, and that's if he plays. The big problem, as Frank just said, is he's not out there enough. I love Bradley Beal. I'd love to have him. Miami, Frank, seems to be a place. I don't know if Miami has the assets, if the Wizards want maybe Tyler Hero or some other things. But the Knicks become more fascinating because the more I talk to people back there, the salary dump, the hit the restart, the having draft picks seems to be the thing. The Wizards haven't really done that. Oh, my God, Cornelius is going to be nuts because it's going to be years before they sniff a playoff game. But for Bradley Beal, he can finish it. He can finish it off with a good team. He can, but not be the first block on a building block.
How about a backcourt of Jalen Brunson and Bradley Beal? Not too shabby. That's it. Okay. We're done. Back to you.
Thanks, guys.